Noah, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to talk to you.
It's good talking to you as well. Now, I do have a quibble with you, sir.
Uh-oh.
Well, I agree with your assessment that this means Bloomberg is probably going to lay low in Congress, but I think he's going to use 2014 to really push the issue in states and localities across the country. I don't think he's given up on the gun control fight at all.
Yeah, some people have come after me and said, this is really a 2014 feint, and that's something I agree with, and I probably should have made more mention of it. But the point stands that I made, that this is a departure from what we were told was, what was often repeated, was a very earnest, extraordinarily principled stand against gun violence and the proliferation of firearms and handguns. And for Mike Bloomberg to now be pressured by congressional Democrats to get on both sides of that issue financially dismantles that narrative and has not been discussed in what I believe is a way that would inform the supporters of that movement, who were as earnest and as principled as we were told Bloomberg was, and are now being misled by what was essentially a political desire in the first place, and is now being exposed as such. But that exposure isn't getting nearly enough play.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you 100% there. In fact, June 12th of last year, New York Times had a story, Bloomberg asks donors to withhold gifts over gun votes. On Wednesday, Mr. Bloomberg will send a personal letter to hundreds of the biggest Democratic donors in New York, urging them to cut off contributions to the 4 Democratic senators who helped block the bill in April that would have strengthened background checks on gun purchasers. So back in June, Bloomberg not only wasn't giving money to groups that would give money to these senators, he was actually telling people, don't give money to these senators, don't make sure they don't get a dime, and now he has done a complete 180.
Yeah, completely. And it has everything to do with control of the United States Senate, and it's supremely cynical, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's politics.
Right.
But we shouldn't be pretending that this was anything other than a political effort to create a wedge issue in the first place. And now that it's no longer a beneficial wedge issue, it is being abandoned summarily.
Yes. Again, I agree with you, and I think again, what this shows, as you say, the idealistic folks who may be disillusioned by Mayor Bloomberg. I thought he meant what he said. Look, this is politics, and this means that Mayor Bloomberg is capable of playing the long game, and he views his best effort at passing gun control would be with Harry Reid maintaining his position as Senate Majority Leader. To work with the president, who's going to be in office for the next 2 years, and if that means going along to get along, and hopefully, if these Democratic senators were to win re-election, maybe they might be beholden to Bloomberg. Maybe they might be willing to take a second chance or a second look at legislation. I mean, I know that's the political calculation, but as you say, none of that will ever be said by Mayor Bloomberg. In fact, I doubt they'll ever even respond or say anything about this story.
No, and it kind of makes you wonder just how relevant the gun issue is going to be in the states where we're talking about that these linchpin Democratic senators who really could make or break the Democratic majority in 2014, how big that issue is going to play. I don't really know. It hasn't been in the news a whole lot, and we're talking about, just for clarification's sake, we're talking about Alaska, North Carolina, Louisiana, and Arkansas. And those are red states that Mitt Romney won. And they're going to be contested probably primarily, I would say, today based on what we're seeing on the issues associated with the Affordable Care Act's rollout. But the gun issue dominated 2013. It still has to be resonant. And the admission by Senate Democrats that it is such a loser for these embattled Democratic incumbents to the point where it could actually threaten the majority is quite an admission.
It was less than 10 years ago when Rahm Emanuel was sort of the architect of the Blue Dog Democrat coalition, and the recognition back then a decade ago was that, all right, we're not going to be able to maintain a majority if we're all Rahm Emanuels, if we're all Nancy Pelosi's, and we've got to make sure that moderate Democrats can get elected in the middle of the country. And they really have abandoned that. I don't know if they thought that they could force the sort of blue dog Democrats to go along, if they thought that they could coerce the rest of the country to acquiesce to the Nancy Pelosi-esque dreams, but it didn't happen. And in fact, now I think really what you're seeing is this rejection by a lot of Democrats in Middle America of the gun control point of view. Look at the Democrat running to replace Mitch McConnell, Allison Grimes.
Allison Lindgren Grimes, yeah.
And she had the ads where she was holding the gun and poor trigger placement or hand placement on the trigger, but she's out there trying to appeal to the gun owner. They recognize, at least some Democrats still recognize that running as an anti-gun politician in most of this country is a recipe for losing your election.
Yeah, and you made a pretty good point about the Blue Dog Coalition. Combined with 2010, where we saw a whole lot of Blue Dogs lose their seats, the DLC Democrat has simply become an obsolete creature from the point of view of the Democratic Party. And this began really in 2008 when the national coalition of the president's coalition, the Obama coalition, became what I believe Democrats think is the Democratic coalition. And they didn't really need the centrist, moderate voter who would elect Democrats as long as they were socially conservative on a variety of issues that had nothing to do with economics, really. They were very populist. But that sort of became not a priority for them, and I don't really know if we'll know whether or not that was a bright move until we get to the 2016 cycle when we determine once and for all if the Obama coalition is the Democratic coalition. We're not going to find that out in the midterms. We're only going to know in a general. And if that's not the case, if we find out that actually there isn't really much of a coalition for electing national Democrats who are as liberal as the president is now, then we'll obviously see a resurgence, I believe, of the DLC Democrat, the centrist Democrat, and possibly a rise of the Blue Dogs. Although the Blue Dogs, as we understand them, have been pretty much wiped out, and they're almost an extinct species.
They are, at least in elected office. Now, what's interesting is that I think they're still out there in the country, but again, I think the sort of purge within the party have made that natural demographic for Blue Dog Democrats to feel very unwelcome in the Democrat Party. I just say this based on conversations that I've had with various folks who would very easily fit into a Blue Dog Democrat mold.
Yeah, and it'll be difficult to rebuild that if they do need to rebuild it, right? But they're banking on the assumption that this is no longer necessary. This is the Ray Teixeira rising coalition, the coalition of the ascendant, a demographically diverse coalition of voters that will continue to expand and perpetually elect Democrats to national office in federal elections. So I don't necessarily think anybody thinks that they need that. And the correction is going to be a long way off. And can they pull it off if they need it? The Democratic Party appears to be banking on the assumption that 1980 can never happen again, and that decade was anathema. And we'll see if they're right, because it's going to be a tough cycle moving into 2016. The GOP has a good, strong bench, and if Hillary Clinton is at all tarnished, that's really all they've got. And then we're talking about the base of the party, which is 47, 48%, which is the same as the Republican Party, and they're competing for the middle ground. And the middle ground is kind of turned off, I think, to the liberal vision of government, but not necessarily the liberal vision of social dynamics. So we'll see how that plays out. It's far too early, but it's fascinating to think about.
Absolutely. Listen, Noah, appreciate you coming on the program. It's always good talking to you. Hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you, Cam. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Noah Rothman with the Media.